want to thank my teacher for everything, for inviting me, but also for teaching me all this time. And in fact, that's kind of what the talk is about today. I'm talking about Dogen Zenji's Gyobutsu Igi, Teacher and Disciple Expressing the Dharma. It's actually in the sutra, the translation is on the everyday behavior of a Buddha doing his practice. But what he talks about often, a lot of it, in the fascicle is the relationship between the teacher and the student. So I'm hoping to convey some of my understanding of this fascicle, and I'm hoping that it'll aid you in your practice as well, of living out the Dharma in your everyday life. At the heart of this fascicle, Dogen refers to a teacher and disciple, meditation master Seppo Gisen, and his disciple Gensha Shibi, who was his Dharma heir. The translator notes that the relationship between these two monks is illustrative of what is called the vertical and the horizontal relationship of master and disciple. On one level, Seppo remains Shibi's monastic senior, and on another, the two are on equal footing. What one said was expressed by the other as another way of putting the matter, or as an expansion upon the theme of the first. So, one of the things that I've was thinking about a lot when I was in Japan, I was reading Dogen, and I kept seeing him say that Zazen is kind of sufficient unto itself. That's all it takes. Just sit down and there's your awakening right there. But then I also noticed that he was constantly talking about the importance of the lineage, the ancestors. And I was trying to figure out what is the connection. Like, why does he need to talk about the ancestors if Zazen is so fully self-receiving and employing? One thought I've had about that is that you don't do this by yourself. And that's something that I've learned over and over and over many, many, many times, as I guess all of us might have, that you just don't do this by yourself. And you're not alone. You're never alone. So I just returned, as Gail said, from a 3-month monastic training in Japan at a temple called Toshoji. It's near Osaka, and it trains Japanese and international monks, men and women together. It was founded in 1300 years ago, I should say. It went through a period when it was abandoned, and after that, the Sotoshu came to Docho Seido Suzuki Roshi to ask him to revive it and to start a training monastery in the old way. So I think some of you know and some of you don't know that most Soto Zen temples in Japan no longer serve to train monks. They're active temples, but they don't center their activity on Zazen. Instead, they perform all kinds of vital functions for the families who are affiliated with the temples, especially related to funerals and memorials of family members who have passed away. And that's a very intimate practice. Priests and monks go into people's homes and do the chants, and you learn that family year after year. It's a beautiful practice. So my process of deciding to participate in a practice period connects to this mysterious quality of teacher-disciple relationships that I'm focusing on today. Galen Roshi didn't tell me I should go to Japan to train, but I knew she herself had done so, and over the years I heard her stories about it. her training in Japan and California, and that inspired me to this desire to do monastic training and to start in Japan. I had this aspiration for years, but there was no way with my job to take off for 3 months. And so I decided a number of years ago that I would save money so I could retire early and do this training. And finally that year came, and when I retired, I talked to Galen Roshi about the best place, and we decided on Toshoji. So deciding to leave my life here for a 3-month period was no simple matter. Along with 2 of my sisters, I care for my mother, who has suffered from dementia for more than 10 years. And also, I'm devoted to this temple and my role here as Ino. Even though I'm not a resident, it's been the center of my life since the first day I walked in the doors. And of course, friends and house and cats and garden and yoga classes, many other ties that kept me here. So as I got closer to the time of leaving, Galen Roshi invited me to come to the Hojo with all my robes so that that I would wear as I entered the gates of Toshoji. When priests enter, they dress in regular, somewhat like this, not with the okesa, but with the rakusu, that you hitch up the underrobes, the kimono and the koromo, so that they're not interfering with you walking. And you also have to wear these white kind of wrappings around your arms and shins, and then these special sandals and these special sock-like tabi socks. So I remember that day in Galen's Hojo with a warm feeling. She was passing on her own experience and knowledge, and there's something intimate about somebody dressing you, helping you dress. And not only that, but she had bought the sandals for me when she went with the group to Japan. She came back with these beautiful sandals, which are nicer than anybody else's sandals. I love them. I hardly wanted to wear them because they're so nice. She even brought out her own cloths for the binding of the shins and the wrists, because mine were too big. They wouldn't stay on. So as she showed me how to wear all these articles of clothing, she moved around me, tying this string or helping me fasten that hook. And she told me stories about her own experience in the monastery in Japan and going on Takahatsu, begging rounds when she was there. I mean, on the little cloths that go around your wrist, her name is on there. It was just really lovely to see that every time I put them on. So when it came time for me to dress in the hotel room in Osaka, in Okayama's closer, and then you go one more closer town, and then you're there. That morning, a few weeks later, I had Galen Roshi's words and advice in my mind. When I stood in front of the mirror, I saw myself as she would see me. Straighten my juban. The juban is this little white undershirt, and kimono neckline, as she would have me do. Held my hands in shashu, as she's often reminded me to do. That it wasn't just these physical signs that showed my alignment with her teaching. It was having her in my mind, reminding me I wasn't alone, that she and all of you were with me, and that all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas were with me, that I was never alone, that my actions were part of this dynamo of causes and conditions that brought me there to live and be lived for the benefit of all beings. So Dogen names his fascicle Gyobutsu Igi, focusing on the everyday behavior of practice. Dogen tells the reader, Becoming proficient in one's daily conduct whilst on the path towards Buddhahood is what is meant by a Buddha just doing his practice. So, becoming proficient in one's daily conduct whilst on the path towards Buddhahood is what is meant by a Buddha just doing his practice. He adds, before a Buddha speaks, he gives a hint of his spiritual activity, which is woven into whatever he does. There's a story of a Buddhist magazine journalist who asked the same question of several different teachers of if a student came to you, how would you teach them the Dharma? And while others responded with insights concerning the Dharma, Galen Roshi said she would probably invite them in for tea and sit and chat with them, get to know them. So that simplicity of that kind of teaching, it's very subtle, and you can miss it. You can miss knowing that that's actually teaching. So Galen's own teacher, Tenshin Reb Anderson Roshi, has told this story about a student who kept demanding teaching from his teacher, and the student finally left the monastery in frustration. And as the student was leaving, the teacher asked, "Didn't I accept the cup of tea when you gave it to me?" These are simple daily activities, not pronounced teachings. So while Dogen's concern here is in warning the reader not to go looking for realization as if it were separate from the present moment of one's daily conduct, daily actions of body, speech, and mind, he's also asking his reader to focus on becoming proficient in one's daily conduct while on the path towards Buddhahood, weaving spiritual activity into whatever she does. So I arrived at Toshoji 30 minutes before the time I had arranged. I was supposed to get there at 3, and I asked the hotel concierge to tell the taxi driver I wanted to get there at 2:30 to make sure I got there on time. So I had to say goodbye to the nice taxi driver. He wanted to help me with my bags in, and I couldn't let him do that because I wasn't supposed to be there yet. I stood on the other side of the temple gate. So a gate is actually a big build. It's not just a gate; it's a big building. And so I stood kind of hiding behind it until you're supposed to hit the Han 3 times when you are announcing your presence there. And so I just stood looking around the landscape for that 30 minutes. There's a big Jizo Bodhisattva outside, and the lichen is growing over his face. It gives him a funny facial expression, so I was enjoying that. There's so many years I had been wanting to do this. It was just unreal. It just felt unreal that I'm actually going to get to go in there, and am I going to be up to the task? So at one point I realized I wanted to take a picture of the first site, and so I just kind of aimed my camera around the corner and took a picture. And I sent it to Galen Roshi and my sisters, but I didn't realize that the Wi-Fi was too low to actually send it. So they had heard from me before I left the hotel, but they never heard from me once I got there. And so I hadn't known that when I would get there that they would take my phone and I wouldn't get it back for more than a month. So everybody was kind of left to wonder, how did it go after the hotel? And I didn't know that till much later, even than that. Let's see. So I didn't, so this abrupt cutoff of my contact with my teacher meant that I had to walk forward into the practice, conducting myself as I had been trained to do, not consulting anyone from home as I went along. Just kind of, here I am, not alone, but no direct contact. I felt this conduct in what felt natural about putting myself into the workflow of temple life, not indulging in the many ways of escaping the schedule. So I'm not saying any of this to compare myself favorably with others, but I'm just noting how my previous training made this process feel natural to me. The schedule varied every day, but we generally got up at 4 with the Shuso's bell and immediately got dressed and went straight to Zazen. This was about a 10-minute period. You just got up, got dressed, and brushed your teeth quickly, and then you were there for 10 minutes later in Zazen. So from that moment until the work period that followed, breakfast every day, we went from group activity to group activity, Zazen, then service, then breakfast, and then soji. And then we had a morning tea. So after tea, there was a break, and some people napped, some took walks, some did correspondence of one sort or another. I was given the freedom to choose what I do during these breaks throughout the day and into the evening. And I decided, even after I got my phone back, not to use it except every 10 days and sometimes more than that. So I could check on my mother. And without that source of distraction, I found that I had the freedom to choose what was good for me. And I decided to study Dogen, so I studied several of his fascicles closely, and pursuing these questions that I had long wondered about. And I also added periods of Zazen. Sometimes Dogen in the middle of the fascicle say, just do Zazen. And I would say, okay, I'm doing it. Shut the book. Either go to the sodo, or in the room, somebody had usually you sleep on the floor on a futon, but somebody had donated a bunk bed. Very unfortunate, because it's a child's bunk bed, but you don't throw anything away, so there it is in the room. And but after a while, I decided to start sleeping on the top bunk. It was more, I wasn't hitting my head all the time on the, and so I would sit up on the top bunk doing Zazen. And then the roommate would come in, and she would suddenly realize, whoa, there she is. So I'd have to say, when she opened the door, I'm up here sitting Zazen. So she got used to it. So there's this, I just had a lot more time to do that. I mean, usually I realized how much time I waste on the phone. I definitely realized that. So adding these periods of Zazen into the day gave me a grounding that would then underlay all the other activities of the day. And I also learned how the kitchen worked. So for every meal, there's a tenzo or a cook and a fukaten or an assistant tenzo, and they cooked for 25 to 30 people. But the last 20, they did great. It's amazing how well they did in this tiny little kitchen. But the last 20 or so minutes got pretty harried. And so I would go into the kitchen at those moments. I would always get in there about 20 or so minutes early. I'd stand for a moment and see what the mood of the tenzo was, or what was needed, and then I would go wash dishes, start the washing and drying, or help set up the table, or bring dishes to the table, whatever task the tenzo might ask me to do. And this was a silent practice of getting there early, and that practice felt very natural and easy. I didn't see it as doing good. I was just doing what my teacher had always shown me to do, to step in and help where help was needed, doing so in silence while watching for the needs of those who were in charge so as not to interfere or obstruct. So the rules of Toshoji are a little different in terms of who can enter the kitchen, I should say, because we have more people helping here with cooking. And so everybody else doesn't go in the kitchen, and we don't need to do that. But even those rules are different, I naturally resorted to Galen Roshi's teachings about how to enter a workflow unobtrusively. And these teachings didn't occur in words. They more often occurred with my watching her or her other students doing it. This learning by osmosis is a really big part of our practice. We don't get manuals most of the time. We often don't get direct teaching on many of these very important things. We watch our teacher move through a room. We see how she moves objects. We notice how she stirs a pot of soup, how she greets people. The image of her in my mind was ever present, whether I was talking with fellow students about their struggles or working in the kitchen or participating in ceremonies. This is, as I said, it's a very subtle form of teaching. So Dogen relates the idea of the interdependence of teacher and student. He uses the language of clarity or immaculacy to describe the everyday comportment of living the Dharma without grasping after a sense of enlightenment. Dogen writes, "This relationship is beyond me and beyond you. Within this immaculacy, the me that is the real me, which all the Buddhas protect and keep in mind, is what the everyday behavior of a Buddha doing his practice is. And the you that is the real you, which all the Buddhas protect and keep in mind, is what the everyday behavior of a Buddha doing his practice is." So I just think that's just so beautifully put. It's just really amazing. So I'll say it one more time because it's a little hard to follow. So he begins by saying, this relationship is beyond me and beyond you. So we often think of ourselves as self and other. We define our relationship with other people. I am I because I'm not you. And so he's saying it's beyond that division, that dualism of me and you. Within this immaculacy, the me that is the real me is what the everyday behavior of a Buddha doing his practice is. And the you that is the real you is what the everyday behavior of a Buddha doing his practice is. So he puts everything on the same plane, repeating the same words for his teacher and student. The disciple's relationship with the teacher is a disciple's relationship with the Buddha and the Dharma. Both the teacher and the student put forth the effort to discern and to manifest the Buddha Dharma. They work with and respond to each other in a reciprocal relationship. Dogen insists that the Buddha Dharma isn't something that the Buddha accomplished once and for all, but something that must be addressed and lived by each disciple at each moment. So this is another one of the things he says in this fascicle that I just think is just such a gift to hear. He writes, "We cannot gauge or measure the great way by using what some Buddha might think." It sounds a little disrespectful. So we're not going to gauge or measure the great way by using what some Buddha may think about it. The thoughts of any Buddha represent but a single angle. They are, for instance, like the opening of one flower. So instead of saying this is an authority and you have to follow that authority, by the book, it's not that. The Buddha awoke in his own right, and we awake in our own right. We're learning from the Buddha and our teachers and everybody, but we're waking up in our own right. The Buddha was like a flower that opened, and so are we. Dogen thus discounts this idea of a singular master who held the truth one time, a long time ago, and instead he claims that everyone must live out their awakening on their own terms, each student responding to what each teacher has taught, generation after generation. In the monastic training I underwent, I needed this old-fashioned virtue of fortitude in dealing with the limits of my strength and ability. I was given a series of roles, and that's the way you're trained as a monk there is, first you're in one role. As soon as you think you are not making 100 mistakes a day. They say, all right, let's move on to the next roll. So I would study this booklet that they had, and I would note it. I would write everything down in my little notebook, highlight it, then underline the parts that I really needed to remember. And there would be the bell at 4:00, and I would get into the Soto at 4:10, and I would be like, oh, what was it again? I would, the doshi would come in, and I couldn't remember if I was supposed to have the charcoal lit, or, it was just amazing how different it is when you're in your body, in the moment, trying to do the thing. I think so much that I had learned and knew. In a training monastery in Japan, when you enter, you're the newest of the beginners, no matter how much previous training you might have been. And everything is new. All the things that I might be guiding people here with don't necessarily apply. And also, if there are 26 monks above you, then many of them will tell you when you've made a mistake. There's just no holding back on, did you notice that you... Sometimes they would say, sorry, but I need to tell you. It's like, it's okay, please tell me, I want to know. So once the kindest and most gentle of all the monks there, he's from China and knows Japanese perfectly and wants to go train in Eiheiji. He said to me one morning, I don't know if you forgot that bell, this important bell, or you did something wrong. And I said, I know, I forgot. I knew right after I forgot. And he said, you said that same thing yesterday. And he said it in such a sweet way, not at all being ironic or sarcastic. He was very, and I was like, oh, I did. So, I went back to my room. I actually talked to several people, like, what was the bell again that I missed? And could you show me, and all that stuff. That one I didn't forget again. So, and another time when I had gotten all the things right, you first hit the bansho drum, and then you hit the han, and then you're supposed to ring this bell, and then they say all Buddha's 10 directions except in Japanese. Oh no, not all, the road chant in the morning, and I had forgotten that one bell. So they were all sitting in there like, when is she going to ring that bell? Somebody comes running out, and I was like, what do I do? Like, I knew I was doing something wrong, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do. And he just hit the bell for me. But so they all said, okay, the Shuso decided I need a full retraining. So during the Soji period that afternoon, that sweet monk, the one I was telling you about, was going to train me for the whole thing. And when we got out to the front, to the last little bit of it, there's a part where you hit the drum, and then across the courtyard, the tenzo hits this umpan, and you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, like a little roll down together. And I said, did I do this part right? And he said, he couldn't help but laugh. He just kind of started giggling. And it's like, no. Not by a long shot. It's just amazing. It's you kind of rely on your ignorance of not knowing how badly you're doing, So the surprising thing was that I didn't feel offended, or it's just interesting. I just noticed how odd it was that I wasn't feeling offended or defended. I wasn't like, yeah, but I know back in Houston, like I didn't feel the need to say that to people, because I know they must have heard it thousands of times. Like, all these people are going. Often in their mature practice lives to get trained in Japan, and then they're suddenly a rank beginner, I genuinely wanted to learn, and in this lack of resistance to being a beginner, I sensed my teacher's training there too. Yes, there have been many occasions when she directly praised the virtue of beginner's mind, but the deeper teaching has been more subtle. For instance, seeing her own delight in learning something new, and also living in the culture of welcome here at Auspicious Cloud Temple. So Dogen had a formidable intellect, and he was also a poet. As a Zen teacher, since he was often unsettling concepts that had become entrenched in Japanese Buddhism, the connections he makes are often counterintuitive. Yet he graces his writing with moments of clarity that feel so contemporary as to manifest as your own experience laid out in words. The moments when Dogen offers encouragement to monks are inspiring. In adding more about this process of doing one's practice in everyday life, he writes, "In the unswerving stillness of this exploration, you will come to understand and recognize that the myriad turnings and shiftings within your mind are due to the brightness and openness of your mind, and that the three worlds of desire, form, and beyond form are simply great barriers within the mind. And even though what one has come to understand and recognize are simply the myriad thoughts and things that arise, this in itself has put into action the homeland of our true self, and is the same living experience of such a person being just the thing." So, so many times I've thought of these turnings and shiftings within my mind during Zazen as just being hopeless. And he's saying these are the very things that are helping us find the homeland of our true self. So he captures this dynamic of Zazen. It's a process of being in stillness, watching the mind's turnings and shiftings, he assures his monks that the myriad turnings and shiftings are due to the brightness and openness of your mind. So many times I've thought it as the stubbornness of my mind, the turnings and shiftings, but he's saying it's the brightness and openness of your mind that's doing this. And then he says that the three worlds of desire, form, and beyond form are simply great barriers, just like simply great barriers. I can picture that landscape of the great barriers and all that. And then this inspirational motivation that he gives, even though what one has come to understand and recognize are simply the myriad thoughts and things that arise, this in itself has put into action the homeland of our true self. So our practice is not at all a lone individual's practice. We might go off on our own and sit still, but we're still social animals. We're inspired by social connections, and we're goaded by social obstructions. The most concentrated form of that social connection is a relationship between a teacher and a student in the Dharma. Dogen writes, "When you realize the fruits of your effort, which is your ability to hit the target through word or deed in response to your teacher, then your majesty will envelop all the myriad things that arise, and your eye will tower over the entire world. You will have a radiant brightness that goes beyond your mastery of letting go and holding back. This is the monk's hall, the Buddha's hall, the temple kitchen, and the temple gate." So the ideal here is that a mature practice with your teacher enables you to hit the target through word or deed in response to her. And he promises this grand sense of mastery when that happens. The world, likely a reference to suchness, will be within one's view. And the list of the spaces of the monastery is intriguing. The monk's hall is where you sit zazen. The Buddha hall is where you do ceremonies. The temple kitchen is very important in Dogen's vision of the daily practice of a Buddha. It's a place where the stuff of life, nourishing food, is transmitted into a form that fuels a monk's practice. It's the nexus between the nourishing fruits of the earth and the ability to live and be lived for the benefit of all beings. And then the temple gate is where you enter the monastery, but also where you leave to go back out into the world and do the work that needs to be done. These moments of hitting the target with word or deed in response to your teacher happen over a long course of time in working with your teacher. They don't just occur in the formal interview of Dokusan, but in daily work together, in hearing the teacher's Dharma, in many, many ways. So, as you might know, going to live in a monastery as a monk is called home leaving. That process of leaving the home for me was quite a task. I worried for months, if not years, about what to do with my 2 cats, how to get the stray cat that lives at my house fed and watched, how to keep the house from falling into ruin, at least so as not to offend the neighbors, and how to leave my mother, who is in her last years or months or even days, and how to walk away from my duties here at the temple, knowing others would have to do more. In that long planning process, with each month, one more dilemma would be solved. Often by a beloved friend saying, "I can do that." Finally, after giving my house keys to 5 dear friends, plus a hyper-responsible vet tech, more responsible than I am, I could pack my priest clothes and winter wear and into 2 bags and lock the door behind me. I could fly to Osaka and then get myself to Gyakage and walk into the monastery, giving up my phone and for the abbot there to hold, and trusting that all would be well at home. Monk is known as unsui, and that means clouds and water, from a Chinese poem which reads, "To drift like clouds and flow like water." Because in medieval times, and still today, monks often move from monastery to monastery, seeking teaching and training. But as Helen Baroni writes, the term unsui can be applied to more broadly to any practitioner of Zen, since followers of Zen attempt to move freely through life without such constraints and limitations of attachment, like free-floating clouds or flowing water. So if you've wondered why the temple here is called Auspicious Cloud Temple, that might be a little bit of an answer to that. Such a mind of no abode, where we train in letting go our hold on fixed ideas and ideologies, might evoke a sense of alarming rootlessness. But as Dogen says here, when we let go of all those fixed ideas that falsely construct a sense of small self, we enter the homeland of our true self. I often wondered during those 3 months where my relationship with my teacher was and how she was present in my actions and words. I feel that my actions and words, my dignified bearing, as the title of this fascicle terms it, responded to her teaching and extended it or confirmed it for myself. In his fascicle, Dogen says, "On those occasions when heart and mind are stripped bare, blossoms burst forth on the iron tree, and the world is redolent with their perfume."